When I first found out that one of my most played games on Steam is having a show, I was excited. I've seen the short animation for the DLCs, and seeing that the first teaser was of that same nature, I thought that the idea of a silent beheaded show, the same fun story content of the game, with the animations of the DLC trailer, could turn out to be a blast. But when the trailer of the show finally dropped, and I was bombarded with the truth of the show to be a talking beheaded journey with an unfamiliar girl, my expectations changed, and naturally skepticism arose. However, after finishing the first actual episode, all of my preconceived notions changed drastically, and I went out here, waiting a week for another episode to drop. The first episode is actually quite good. How so? The show starts with an introductory background religious scriptures depicting the setting and the prophecy of beheaded, rendering him as a divine figure that some believers look up to. It immediately transitions to show our main character Lore as a member of this religious following who's also promoting the tale to make a living for herself. On top of that, this scene follows up with a crucial narrative setup for her character in the form of her honesty, while blending it through a comedy sequence of her comments for the citizen's wife not very charming looks, which does result in her failing. Again, for someone who didn't have good expectations for this show, these few bits really kept me hooked. Lore and the way she's characterized here really shows a form of relatability to the audience, and that piece of introductory sequence at the very least shows that she's a struggling citizen trying to do her best. That may not seem much, but that little piece of characterization did manage to slightly endear her as a character. This is enhanced by the following sequence, which shows that she's somewhat discriminated against and bullied by her peers due to her low ranking status. This adds small depths to the world, implying a form of hierarchy in her role and beliefs, while also potentially adding a form of rivalry or dynamic with the Rachel character. As she kept up her efforts, she eventually got caught by the concierge and was put in jail. It's a nice payoff and a natural consequence for her extreme honesty, especially when her action is a sensitive political movement. But the way she admits to her action is very consistent with her characterization we've known of. The inciting incident happens in jail as she's put up together with Beheaded, and surprisingly, the way the Beheaded is characterized is also genuinely amazing. He provides a stark contrast to the defined figure he's previously depicted as in the prophecy, showing no signs of heroism. The scene follows an escape in a similar nature to the original animated Dead Cells trailer when the game first launched. It shows him getting caught directly after managing to get past the first guard, with the guard highlighting how his attempt to escape is slightly further than last time, which I thought was a small but quite neat reference to the trial and error process of the gameplay of Dead Cells, or roguelike in general as the player in those games progress, even if it's only a very minor progress from one enemy to another, like how this scene depicts it. I may or may not be reaching here, but already it's great that they were able to put up more substance in the source they are referencing. Moreover, Lore saves him as soon as she can, and I think this little sequence is another crucial characterization for her, as this highlights her instinctual, protective nature, which is great as she's been established before as a guardian, first and foremost. Her acting decisively to save the Beheaded when he gets into trouble also is probably rooted in her hopeful belief in the prophecy, as she definitely wants the Beheaded to get closer to fulfilling it. This moment is also where the Beheaded starts to feel more use for Lore, which is why he asks her to help him escape. Of course, Lore only accepts after she reaffirms him with her ideals again. The Beheaded, being the jerk he is, attempts to manipulate her by accepting her request in a dodgy and unconvincing way. It's not a subtle setup towards his eventual betrayal, but without being subtle is the show's intention here. Rather, I think the non-subtlety shows how the Beheaded is not really afraid of showing his true nature to people, and only half-heartedly attempt to hide it when he has to selfishly make people do his favors. From this moment on, we get a montage of their escape, framed the same way as the actual game, with reference to the health bar, cells, golds, and a revealing map. Throughout the montage, we do get some voice lines from Lore, which does provide additional character for her, like our encounter with Beheaded fuels her motivation to prove herself to Rachel, who has mistreated her before. It also shows more of her idealism with the prophecy, because to be able to confront the reality that the religious chosen figure of her beliefs, is a quote-unquote misogynist and moron and still continue to believe wholeheartedly in the prophecy shows that she's exceedingly hopeful, despite the terrible and unforgiving circumstance she's placed in. Perhaps those circumstances even is why she's so hopeful to begin with. As they are close to the entrance, the beheaded does get hasty and Lore gets ambushed. Previously, the dynamic was shown to yield positive effects, with the beheaded's super abilities allowing Lore to escape from the cell, while Lore herself contributes by saving the beheaded when his abilities alone fails him, allowing them to reach places they otherwise cannot do as an individual. Whereas this scene extends their dynamic by showing the more negative side, with the beheaded recklessness that led to Lore's ambush being worsened with Lore's inability to line any situation. If anyone hasn't caught on already, I'm sure with Lore's worsening of the situation, it's made clear that when she said during the start, it really wasn't just a comedy, she also seriously meant it. Regardless, the following scene contains quite possibly the most profound character moment in the episode for both Lore and the beheaded. I suppose I'll start in order with the beheaded. If you caught on to the previous setup, it is obvious this payoff or betrayal is going to happen. Him not caring about Lore's life on the line really amplifies his non-heroism, and even places him as not just a jerk, but a complete scoundrel, immoral and acting solely on his selfish desires. Another crucial characterization happens with the beheaded's comments, which highlights how he would rather exploit others and drown in his fat than make a benevolent meritocracy. These comments, as well as his commanding and elitist nature, continuously considering Lore as a peasant and ordering her to act as he pleases, hints at the most important twist of Dead Cells. The beheaded is the king. With how well he's characterized in that manner so far, it would seriously be a miss if the show doesn't do so. Now, of course, that line isn't the only serious line, as another one reveals his only purpose in life: to die. It's a common trope in stories for immortals to want to die, as oftentimes the toll of living for such a long time can be a continuous pain for them. This is especially true as the beheaded considers life as a hell that torments him, which obviously shows that he no longer considers the world to have much value for him. Of course, we still don't have much knowledge for what led to him becoming the person he is now, but taking into consideration the game's lore, before the beheaded fused with the king, he does not have his memory yet, so if they are going towards that direction, it's quite a mystery as to how they'll progress his character after the beheaded gains his memory back. Now, moving on to Lore, her idealism towards the prophecy blinds her to the betrayal, even though she previously considered him as not being heroic. It's clear that she still wants to believe that the prophecy is true in one way or another, hence her trust in the beheaded's promise. Regardless, unlike the beheaded, she was aware that an ambush will happen, which proves that she's far more considerate. And the fact that she managed to convince the beheaded in the end shows that she understands effective ways of reaching her goals, but is restrained by her beliefs. Her resolution to finally lie is obviously a significant point in her character, due to her continuous devotion towards her belief of not lying throughout the episode. We don't know if breaching it would eventually kill her, but the fact that she would do it solely on the basis of saving the world shows that she's completely selfless. This fosters a deeper sense of dynamic between the character as their views and beliefs contrast one another. The beheaded wishes to die out of a selfish, intrinsic desire from himself, whereas Lore is willing to die out of a selfless, extrinsic desire to save those around her. Moving forward, this sparks hope for the beheaded, and he recklessly saves her. The line that follows does slightly confuse me on the first watch, but watching it again, I'm assuming the intention of this was to perhaps highlight how religion made her believe that the prophecy will happen. So it made her believe that she does not need to think, while in reality it could be that the prophecy might happen, but only because of Lore and her resolve to bring it to fruition, thinking that her purpose will absolutely be served as she goes along in her journey. If this episode has any flaw, the biggest one I would consider would probably be the third act with the concierge. At first, the concierge threatens the beheaded with Laura, but he does not care about her. But later, when he does care, the concierge does not double down and use that as a leverage anymore. Instead, his character would do nothing at all as he watches the beheaded save her. The only defense I can think of this moment is that the beheaded is extremely fast. But I still feel as though that's quite weak of a defense, as the frames here shows that the others were still aware of his movements. So couldn't the concierge shout to him by threatening Laura's life more? Moreover, another flaw some people might consider from watching this show is that the idea that Laura's religion never prevented her from keeping her mouth in place. So the fact that she would admit to her doings makes no sense. But with this one, I don't see it at all. In the first instance of her not keeping her mouth in place, regardless of whether she kept her mouth in place or not, the concierge probably would have sent her to prison anyways after she's seen to be promoting the death of the king. I think having her admit to it is more of a writing choice to make it clear to the audience of one of her core characteristics moving forward, especially when this happened in the first act of the show. In the second instance, however, if she did shut her mouth, that would lead to the beheaded lying, which technically means that she's participating in the lie. And since we don't really know the extent of the rule, as the show keeps it quite vague, I don't think her admitting their true intention is necessarily a flaw. Now, going out of this review, one thing that people seem to hate about this show is the fact that the show is not one-one with the actual game lore, by including characters like Lore. This is just going to be a short one, but I don't see this as a problem at all. Most adaptations often include original characters. I mean, you can point to me with all of the bad original adaptations that have come out over the years, but with all the bad ones, there are good ones too. In the end of the day, what really matters is that the story is actually good. And so far, that's been the case. Now, it's not like I'm going to make a review of each episode in this manner, and if I am actually going to review this entirely, I'm most likely going to review the entire following episodes in one video. But yeah, as of the creation of this video, there's only 3 episodes available in the Animation Digital Network on YouTube, which is where I watched the show. Since I'm not going to study French just to review the show, I'm fine with waiting a month or two until all the episodes are released. It's also unlikely that I'm going to review short animated shows like this again, so if you found this video insightful or are interested in what I have discussed, simply subscribe and hit the notification. Since I am still going to put out more media analysis in the future that ranges from games and movies to shows and even books.